Wow, doesn't this look festive? I thought I had run out of lounge, crazy, funny songs that I have that are exactly 2.5 minutes long, but I stumbled across that one recently. Hello, our users. My name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology, 11 or 12-year user of R for normal, boring statistical applications. But for the last 8 or 9 years, the majority of those 11 or 12 years, I've also been executing my entire project from within the same environment that I specify my R script. And so if you're coming from a programming background, this is called literate programming. I'm not coming from that background. I'm coming from a social sciences background. So I've been referring to this as single platform project execution. Sometimes it's called end to end kind of workflows. But basically, we're just promoting this way of structuring your work if you're touching analytical things at all, whether that be qualitative or quantitative. If you're doing if you're doing analytical things and you're using a platform, a language like R or Python, we now have resources available to execute the entire project. That is, you don't have to think of these languages as just data analytic tools. These are actually environments within which you can write a full paper. You can create websites. You can make slides like the one you're looking at, minus the candy canes. The candy canes come here via StreamYard, the company that I pay monthly to be able to speak to you fine people. So it's not that much money. I'm very happy to do it because there aren't that many people out there promoting this, and I think we need more of it. So I'm here every week at Tuesday from roughly 7 to 8 Eastern. Sometimes I'm joined by collaborators and friends. But regardless whether I'm going to be joined or not, I'm going to be here as a resource for you, a live resource, because there are a lot of tutorials and resources out there on YouTube that kind of explain how to do stuff, focus things. But I wanted to also be available as kind of just an interactive resource. If people have questions, you can pop by and ask them. Some of you may have noticed if you watch these weekly things semi-regularly, I switched up our theme again for this week's slides. This week's slides, by the way, are available in the comments. And if you get to this at a point where the comments aren't yet populated on YouTube, they should be also in the video description. Now, what I haven't been putting in the video description, but I'm going to start doing weekly in the comments or in the chat, is put access to this kind of tutorial that I have. I'm calling it a tutorial, but it's a one-off that I made for a guest lecture at a former university I used to work at. And the content of that class was psychological measurement, but the content doesn't really matter. What you should be able to do is take that template, and as long as you have Quarto installed on your machine, you should be able to build yourself a nice report. And so that nice report will have things like images in it, it'll have tables of contents, it'll have cross-references, it'll have a bibliography or citations. And so it's just a lot of cutting and pasting. I wrote all the code and I wrote the code that you need to get started with it. And then you can take that and kind of customize it on your own. But I think it's a different way to engage with this process of kind of crafting these documents. Instead of me just sitting here talking, it actually gives you more of an interactive document that you can access and interact with. Okay, so every week I'm here to answer questions if anyone has them. In the absence of that, we've been covering topics. I'm really excited this week. This week's topic was a suggestion or a request from someone that's been watching very loyally. So thank you. But it's something that is timely because we've been going through the alphabet. So the topics that we've been choosing, we're up to the letter P in the English alphabet. Next week, we're actually gonna stall ourselves on P for a little bit because there was another request to take a look at positron again. That the the kind of second generation RStudio. That's not the best way to talk about it, but the IDE that Posit created, that is that is kind of performing a similar data science kind of environment for people, but it comes from a different tradition. It comes Well, we'll talk about it next week. So next week we'll revisit positron. I'm not excited about that because I haven't really enjoyed. I haven't found it to be that enjoyable for me, and I do generally like. I do find enjoyment in crafting things this way. But so anyway, that's next week. Next week we'll talk about positron. Tonight we're going to talk about flow diagrams and flow diagrams that are used or recommended to be used in systematic reviews. Very, it sounds silly to say I'm excited about that because there's not really anything exciting about systematic reviews. Again, the resource here that's on this second landing page, not the splash page, but the page directly after that, gives you access to this resource, which is an online kind of Quarto. If my template tutorial is a resource to help you get started to build something, this should be considered aligned with that as well as these weekly sessions. I guess this is the orientation philosophy, is to try to help people, give people encouragement and a resource if they want to try to structure their work using these principles. Okay. So sometimes I rush through that intro because I'm like, my goodness, it's kind of repetitive and redundant. But it's kind of important if someone new stumbles across this. So I probably shouldn't rush it quite as much. But anyway, so before we take a look at flow diagrams, let's take a look at what happened last week.
Last time you remember, Bullwinkle's ukulele concert was interrupted by the appearance of thousands of monstrous moon mice who began to close in on our friends until they were surrounded on all sides.
There's another way to be surrounded.
On the outskirts of the mob of moon mice were Boris and Natasha, who seemed to have lost control over the fearsome creatures.
What you're doing, darling?
I'm checking wiring on this one, Natasha. Crossover terminal here, overload plate there.
Where does this wire go, darling?
Natasha, please, that may be live wire.
How do I know if it's live wire?
Well, if you touch it like this and it goes...
Boris! Oh, dear. Now I'll never know if it's live or not.
Meanwhile, behind their barricades, our heroes were still determined to fight to the finish against overwhelming odds.
How about a keen fight song, fellas?
Do you have to?
Fight, fight, fight for frostbite high. Flying our colors to the sky.
What colors, Bullwinkle?
Pomegranate and puce. Cheer and cheer and cheer again. Fight with might, but mostly main.
Pomegranate and puce. That's kind of the color that I have chosen here. When we had the pink background, I guess it wasn't as prominent, but if I had to, so I might say plum to stick with the alliteration, I guess. Pomegranate, puce, and plum. But the plumness or the puceness is puce. I think puce is a variety of purple. I know pomegranate is. But those are apt descriptors for the color of our font, which wasn't as prominent when we had the pink background. Now we're just switching to the blue background for the first time this week on these weekly slides. Again, because I don't know, I need to mix things up every once in a while. So last week what we looked at was observable.js. There's a link. The title of this slide links to a Quarto help page that describes a little bit how Quarto is envisioning our use of observable.js. And the way that we're going to use them, the way we're talking about weekly, the focus of these weekly sessions is we would use them as a code chunk within a document. And now it's going to have to be an HTML document type because by its nature, the element of this OJS that is intriguing and appealing to us is the interactivity of it. So that's what really Quarto that's really what Quarto is focused on as well with OJS, is the interactive capabilities that come with it. And so last week what we did was we first of all did a looking into of what exactly OJS is, and it turns out that it's used by something that I didn't anticipate, but the industry, one of the industries that uses OJS quite heavily, I guess, is journalism. And the journalists, one of the ways in which they use, well, it's trippy, isn't it? This is 3i Atlas's view of us, I guess, as we're scrolling through. But one of the things you can produce using this OJS capability is something called a scrolly or scrolly telling. My goodness, I keep butchering that. But as you scroll through a web page, the the visual elements are aligned with the text, and so this is called scrolly telling. And I put a new link here. There's an iframe, so you can kind of just scroll through here in a small sense if you're curious. But if you want to see the full page, go ahead and click that scrolly tell. I am so happy that this is the last week I'm going to have to try to pronounce scrolly telling. That's my that's what pleases me most about tonight's slides, because man, that's a mouthful, that tongue twister. But absent scrolly absent scrolly telling, because we're not journalists, we are social and behavioral scientists, and whatever else you are that brings you here, everyone's welcome. I love the fact that it's somewhat interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary in terms of the people that are interested in this. If there are any journalists, that's great as well. But I don't know OJS, I don't know the language, so we interacted with AI agents in Grok. We went back and forth on Grok a few times. Grok was great. Grok was great 2 weeks ago. I wouldn't say great, but Grok was useful 2 weeks ago in terms of rendering this. So this is a Grok OJS interactive slide, or interactive visual, I should say. Last week we spent quite a bit of time trying to get Grok to give us something new, to give us something else. And I talked a little bit last week about how much back and forth we had to engage with the Grok AI. Now, to give Grok a little bit of wiggle room here, or an excuse for this. That's not the purpose of Grok. I have had great success in terms of coding, and I would describe this as coding. So in terms of generating script that creates something that you're interested in, GitHub Copilot is fantastic. And so after trying Grok for 10 or 15 minutes, we just poured it over to GitHub Copilot, and we said, hey, can you give us some examples of interactivity using OJS? Now, the thing that's missing on these three tabs, GitHub 1, GitHub 2, and GitHub Copilot 1, GitHub Copilot 2, and GitHub Copilot 3, is usually I would have a code block to the left, or to the right sometimes, and then the element that's being generated adjacent to that. And so one of the things I learned in the interceding week between last week and this week was that it's the OJS code isn't intended to be echoed. And so the process that we use to generate that code and share it is called echoing. That's not, so OJS is going to be a little bit different. That's not an intent of that code itself. And that has to do with the way in which the interactivity is functional. So apparently the interactivity is functional from within the browser specification itself. So it's served within the browser. There's a lot of stuff that's way over my head, but there's not an intent to generate the OJS interactive when we render. So there's something that happens after rendering upon interacting with the browser itself. And so it gave us a few. And so this is one that it came up with last week. And it's just, there's a button, you can click on it and it counts how many times you clicked. And then you get a little visual feedback here as well. One thing I guess that I can mention here, we can spend a little bit of time on. If you look in the lower left-hand corner of all three of these visuals, all three of these interactive examples that we're going to go through, you're going to see undefined. And so this happened the first week as well. So this happened when I generated the Grok interactive visual, the trippy kind of sinusoidal pattern, up and down, looks like an equalizer on an amp, on a musical instrument amp. But so initially when I generated that last week, I was getting this undefined piece of information returned as well. And so through a series of back and forths with Grok, we were able to actually hide that. I didn't try to hide it this week, just I guess to let people know that that's something that can happen when we're trying to use these OJS code chunks, specifically within Reveal.js slides. So we did not get that undefined feedback or output when last week we were generating OJS interactive objects within an HTML file, but there's something specific about these slides where we have essentially an HTML page and then another HTML page and then another HTML page. There's something about that where there is a little extra step that you have to take in order to suppress that undefined. And my recollection is it has to do with specifying on a previous slide that there's going to be some OJS stuff coming in. And so it wasn't a difficult workaround, and last week we got it just fine. I didn't add that correction this week just to kind of let people know that there is a little difference there between how these OJS interactive visuals function within an HTML, within a plain HTML file versus a goopified HTML file, which is how I'd probably explain these slides that you're looking at. So we had a count clicker. We didn't have this one. I couldn't recall without going back and looking at what happened last week exactly what our second script was, because it was a little messy in terms of the exploratory nature last week, just kind of not having a lot of preconceived notion about what it is that we would create and just creating it. So it came up with this just cycling through colors, which isn't all that different from the count clicker, I guess. But there is an index down here that's reported. I'm not sure. The index must be mapped to the color in some way. And then the kind of most impressive graph that GitHub Copilot gave us last week was this worm graph, I'm going to call it. It looks like a two-dimensional function. There definitely is a y-axis specified. There's an x-axis. Neither one of them are labeled, but you can see there's values because you see a minimum y there. We're at the origin there, 0, and then as we go up, you're kind of suppressing some of those values. Last week it was a little more elaborate. We had some colors on here last week. We had categorical information in here as well. My script for these slides was just getting a little too much, so I asked GitHub Copilot to simplify it a little bit, and that's why this looks a little different. I don't know if I noticed it last week, but there is feedback in the kind of title area of this visual that's nice, and it's immediate. Like the information that you see is immediate, and this minimum value is kind of silly until you look at the feedback in terms of that title space. You see showing 84 of 141 points, and if I slide this to a lower, what is it, abscissa, y-axis value, you see that all of those points are going to be shown. So anyway, these observable JS scripts and chunks, these ways to specify interactive visuals within our HTML product type documents are neat. It's nice to have another option. And so the options that I would typically go to would be something like Shiny. And so another application in terms of HTML files themselves as something like a web page, slides, and then the other product type that is probably going to be something that you might want to consider if you're thinking about these observable JS code chunks would be a dashboard. And so dashboards, historically, they've been run through Shiny, but this may be an option going forward in terms of how we script our interactive visuals. Now, this isn't something that I'm going to be doing because I don't know OJS. So I don't have a level of comfort in terms of scripting. I'm still not there with my AI reliance. I still need the KI, the Kulas intelligence, to say, oh yeah, I understand that. But again, like a lot of these capabilities, what we see right now isn't necessarily what we're going to have in a couple of years in terms of functionality and access. So anyway, that's observable JS. I'm glad we looked at it. Honestly, as I was searching for a topic that started with O, that wasn't something I was very pumped about, just because I didn't know anything about it. And I'm like, I got to talk for an hour about something I don't know about. What is this, college again? I got to feel like a professor again. So tonight what we're going to talk about is PRISMA flow diagrams. And so PRISMA is an acronym. It stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analyses. These people, they cheated a little bit. You can see they took advantage of meta-analysis while kind of not giving proper credit to systematic reviews. And I'm guessing that's just so they had a nicer acronym. I mean, it has to be, right? So Prisma diagrams. So Prisma is a set of reporting standards that says the stuff that should be within systematic reviews. Now this applies to meta-analyses as well, but systematic reviews are a way to qualitatively summarize a literature base. Now the Prisma recommendations themselves stem from, or they're anticipating that this is going to be used for health interventions. So these are people who have some experience in the medical industry or medical field. It's the panels that put this together are fully interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. It's international as well. So there's a lot of these people. I was kind of looking up their affiliations, and a lot of them have Australian affiliations. They have conference that's in, I think the most recent conference I saw was in Scotland. I think there's a lot more international representation in terms of the production of these guidelines and maintenance of these guidelines than there is domestic as an American here. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's great. Just kind of maybe another reason that this is something that's a little further removed from me. Now I am familiar with the flow diagrams, and I am familiar with some adoptions of these standards that psychologists have taken and given and applied to our field. Apparently this was first proposed and published in 2009. There was an update done in 2020. It says 21 here, but I believe that the update itself occurred in 20. So I'm going to have to double check that. But my recollection of looking through materials this week was that I was seeing a lot of 2020 and not so much 2021. That's a inconsequential difference there. I have a link here to tell you what a systematic review is, but I think a good way to think about it is a qualitative summary of a focused literature topic. As I said, initially the PRISMA panel was thinking about this in the context of health interventions. For a social scientist, behavioral scientist, it can be any focused topic within the literature. When I was my most recent university I was a full-time professor at, we changed our comprehensive exams for our PhD candidates to include systematic reviews, and that was something that a fantastic faculty member, Dan Simonet, primarily was working on, and I think it was a good idea. So he had a lot more knowledge and exposure to this stuff than I ever did, but it's kind of nice this week getting back into it a little bit. So the 2020, I put, if you would like to check this out a little more, I put some hyperlinks to two of the papers in the references here. So you see the two most recent, what are in the reference section as 2021 articles. You'll see a URL on those, and you won't see one on the 2009 one. That's because the 2020 panel and authors and source articles say, all right, this is the new thing, forget about the old one. And they seem largely redundant. So by the way, reading that was like reading an HR manual. It wasn't a ton of fun. But it's what I do for you folks. It's what I do for you folks. And it was good to kind of refresh myself on that. So one of the nice things that they have when you're creating a systematic review is they give you a very kind of thorough checklist of the types of things to make sure to include within different sections of your review itself. And then the thing we're going to focus on tonight is they also recommend the production of something called a flow diagram. And so these flow diagrams, there's a picture of what we expect it to look like here on this page. There's a hyperlink here that takes you, I think, to UNC. So UNC has a little bit of an explanation of PRISMA itself, talks about the checklist and gives you kind of some summarized information. There are templates on here as well that you can use to create a flow diagram. Now we're not gonna use their templates. We're gonna try to create our own flow diagram, and we're gonna try to create our own flow diagram by using a package. So when this became the focal topic this week, initially my thinking was, well, we've now looked at three different ways to create diagrams within Quarto. Quarto is the software platform that's been helping us make these documents. That works kind of under the hood. We're working in our studio and with R, but under the hood we have Quarto that's generating these nice publication-ready documents for us. So I was thinking we could go to Mermaid, which we looked at and played with. We could go to GraphViz, which we've looked at and played with, or we could go to D2, which we've looked at and played with as well. Now, Diagram R is another. There are plenty of options. However, there's also this group that is associated with this consortium of individuals who put together the PRISMA standards, and they created a Shiny app. And in addition to the Shiny app, they also created an R package. And I played around with it quite a bit this weekend. And it does, I think, a nice job of exactly reproducing what you're seeing here in terms of... Now, it's kind of hard to blow up. It's hard to blow up an image that I have a hyperlink hidden on. So I can't give you a great visual of that. But I probably have a hyperlink here. There we go. There are templates that are on this website as well that you can use, and these are Word templates that you can go in there and switch out and change the text within these boxes and change numbers within these boxes. But that's not consistent with this principle that we've been following, which is kind of keeping everything within a plain text file. And so I put a README. I know I'm kind of scattered a little bit on this. Apologize for that. But I put a README in here because the documentation for the package that we're about to go over it's not great. So the documentation is lacking, in my opinion, quite a bit. So there is a paper that walks through the process of using what they created a little bit. I already went through it, so we're not going to go through it together, but it's there if anyone's interested in. First thing I think we'll do is check out their Shiny app. So the Shiny app is, it has a few things on it that I think we want to do. Let me see. Here we go. There's a hyperlink. It's funny. There's hyperlinks to hyperlinks to hyperlinks to hyperlinks. This is one of the things I've noticed within what we're using here. Now, what we're going to do right now is not what I'm going to recommend to do in terms of generating your own Prisma flow diagram, but I want to show what these people came up with because we're going to use their function. We're going to use their capability. It's just we're going to take their capability and swap it from this interactive Shiny interface to we're just going to embed it within the document that you're working on itself, because that's, again, more consistent with the way that we're talking about reproducible research and these single platform project execution workflows. Now, one of the things that they have that is seemingly helpful is a template file, and we're going to come back to this. We're going to come back to the template file where we'll use it, and then I think I'll show you why we probably don't want to use that or rely on that too much moving forward. The Shiny app itself has a few different tabs on it. The one that creates the flow diagram is called Create Flow Diagram. And there's a series of choices that you can make as someone who's interacting with this. Now, one thing I should say about the context for this, the people who put together the Prisma recommendations maintain a website, and on the website they have templates for creating flow diagrams using Microsoft Word. The people that created the Shiny app, as well as the people who created the package that is doing the functions that we're looking at right now, if you read their source, one of their source papers, they have an interest in making these flow diagrams interactive. And so the interactivity is they want to be able to link to repositories of databases of papers that might be relevant for the systematic review itself. And so that kind of seems to be the orientation behind creating this. So it's not just about how it looks, but it's about how it's functioning as well. I don't think that's something that interests me all that much, so I'm not sure that we're going to do that. We unless someone pops by and says they have an interest in it, we can take a look at it. You can start to see how the visual on the right is dependent on kind of toggled choices that you make on the left. On the left is the sidebar where we're making a decision. You can have previous studies either included or not. If they're included, it creates this left-hand column. I'm going to say not included. Searches for other studies is going to be the right-hand grayed out column. So if you take a look here, identification of new studies via other methods. In the PRISMA documentation, there are kind of different sections for, is this a continuing systematic review? Is it a new systematic review? Is it an ongoing systematic review? And so what you have here in terms of these kind of meta options are all consistent with those different branchings that you can take in your individual systematic review. The individual databases, you can see if I don't include them, my upper left-hand box here is just saying how many databases do I have. If you want to include specific databases, you can do that. And then the same thing with registers. So registers and databases are technically two different terms in the context of a PRISMA recommended systematic review. And then we get to some values. So you'll start to be able to see the values on the right change if I put in values here on the left. And that's how you create, that's one way you could create a PRISMA flow diagram using this back and forth kind of process. So again, there's a link to the Shiny app if you're interested. And then you can go ahead and download it as many different file types. I've been really loving SVGs as a file type in terms of images. I think that stands for scalable vector graphic. And the scalability of them tends to just be fantastic. So if you've ever had an image and blown up on it and it just gets blurry, that doesn't happen with these SVG graphics. If ever I'm given the choice, that's something that I either ask for or I try to create. So I love them, love them, love them. Okay, so in addition to this Shiny app, we can also use the package that powers the Shiny app ourselves. And so I think that's what we want to do. Now, in order to use the package, they're recommending that you keep your database information, your systematic review information within a standard format, and that's what this template CSV file is supposed to do. So I'm going to download that. You can see it says 3 because I've already downloaded this a few times. We'll go ahead and open that, and you're going to see that that's a comma separated file. So you're going to need to have some sort of, you're probably going to want to have some sort of, spreadsheet in order to, and you can see I've already played with this a little bit, but you're going to want to have some sort of spreadsheet in order to kind of make sense of that comma separated file. Mine's thinking for me a little bit here. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the file upload. And we're not going to use this because I found this to not be helpful. But what I would like to do is I would like to actually just get it in there so you can see it. You're also going to see it in R, and I think that's the way that I'm going to recommend people interact with it. So I'm going to take Prisma 3. Probably making people seasick here with all of the back and forth that I'm doing. Prisma 3, and I'm going to upload it. And this is what it looks like. It's a different format. So what they have is they have a couple of columns in here that they say you can mess with, and the rest of them they say don't mess around with. The main one that we're going to play with tonight is the N column. So the N has information that's relevant for your search. How many previous studies are you including? How many previous reports are you including? Things like that. There are 33 rows in this template itself. Now I'm going to take this template and I'm going to put it into a project directory. And again, I'm not recommending that any of you use the template because I think I have a better way to access that. But I want to show you what they're recommending as well. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. I think you do want to do this in a project file. At least I do, because I want to know where everything is, and that's one of the easier ways to do that. Now this is going to screw me up later because every time I do this, I end up every time I put something on my desktop within RStudio, I'm too fast sometimes. So when I create a new project, all of my stuff that's hosted on GitHub, I like to keep it in a Git folder. And occasionally when I do fast things like this, it gets screwed up. So I forget to go back and change where it's actually at. Okay, so I'm going to take this Prisma template. It's the same one we just looked at within Google Sheets. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it within my project folder, and we should see it show up in my environment at that point. There it is, and there it is. I think I'm going to rename that as well, just because I don't like that 3 underneath it. Now let's go ahead and create let's do a Quarto document. I was going to say let's do a script, but eventually we're going to want to move this into a document, so let's do a document. I am going to call this paper. Boy, I wonder how many papers I have on my computer. It's not very descriptive, is it? But we're going to call it paper. There it is. It works. It renders. And my recommendation is always take a look at that. We even have a code chunk here that we can hijack. Hijack or Kojak, either one. Does anyone know what Kojak is or was? He was a detective. All of the 1970s and 80s detectives were very clever. That was his superpower. He was clever and he sucked on a lollipop, I think. I think that was Columbo. So I'm going to write a little R script here. Let's do, because we call it paper, let's be generic again and call it data. But I do have that Prisma CSV file loaded, so I'm just going to load it in, and we can take a look at that object, and you're going to see that it looks the same as it did within our within our Google Sheet as expected. Now, one of the reasons I'm not going to recommend going into that CSV and changing the values within there is it's kind of messy in terms of the organization of that CSV itself. I think what might be better is to create a script and a script chunk that actually does all of the amendments that you want to do within the script chunk. Now, again, this is consistent with our concept of plain text editing, so everything's specified within this one file. We do this within RStudio, but you could literally do this within Notepad if you wanted to. Does anyone know what Notepad is? I use Notepad all the time. But Notepad is just a word processing application that doesn't have any formatting associated with it. And my understanding is it used to be an environment that people coded in with some frequency. Now, it doesn't have all this feedback that we see. It doesn't have this formatting in our scripting environment, so nobody is going to want to do that, but you could do that. And so another way to structure our flow diagram information that's consistent with having the capability of doing that is to actually specify any sort of flow diagram values within our script. And so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to build it as well so I can share it with everyone next week. So next week what I'll do is I'll share a code chunk that has all of the information that you might want to put in your personal Prisma flow diagram. So before we change anything, let's actually just see what it looks like. So the Prisma Shiny app is actually accessible through a package, and I think I have a link to that package on this week's slides. So I'm going to try to navigate to that page, and here I think it's this. So if you want the Shiny app, click this Shiny link. If you want the package, click this grayed out link, and here it is. The package itself is called, what is it called? Prisma 2020. Now, I do believe that this is on CRAN, so you should be able to, from within your package tab, this is kind of how I've been doing it most recently. If you just look for Prisma 2020, there it is. You know what? So maybe that's where I got the confusion on the citations, was the package. So the citation dates, I don't want to restart. I already have it loaded, so it shouldn't matter, but I'm just walking you through how to load the package. I think I loaded it from GitHub, not from CRAN, but the GitHub repo doesn't seem to be all that active, so I'm guessing it's probably this very similar in terms of the version. So now that we have that loaded, we should actually be able to use it. Now, there's a couple of steps in terms of using it. Oh, that just goes to the link. So again, I'm not impressed with the documentation of this. It almost seems like it's kind of just abandoned a little bit. I'm going to go to the package reference manual to see what we wanted to do. There's not a ton. Oh, there's more in here. That's the wrong package. So apparently there's a second Prisma pack. Oh, protocol inspection and state machine. You want to do that? That could be interesting too. We could take a look at that. Now, one of the issues with R is it's gotten so doggone popular that there's just so many. It's going to be some duplication, not just of function names, but of package references as well. So here's the documentation that I was looking at. There's a Prisma data function, and so before we read our data into the Prisma function, we need to apply this Prisma data function to it. And so that's what I was looking for, was Prisma data. So that changes it from this data frame, which our CSV is, into, and let's call it something different, Prisma data. And then wasn't that capitalized? I thought that was capitalized. Yeah, Prisma data. And then I believe this turns it into a list. Oops. Helps if you load the library. I was wondering why I wasn't getting any feedback when I started to type Prisma related to the package itself. And it was because I didn't load the library. Rookie mistake. So yeah, so we're getting this list now. And this list is what is going to generate the diagram. So the diagram itself, I believe the function is, just Prisma flow diagram. So Prisma flow diagram, and you know what? I'm going to get out of that, and I'm just going to try to access it on the help panel, because I was looking at this earlier as I was playing with this. And here's some of the attributes that we can play with in terms of the diagram itself. First of all, let's just see if we can get it. And by the way, I'm kind of executing these chunk commands as we go, just to see if I get any sort of feedback, to make sure that the scripting is okay. I do this frequently as I'm working within even a Quarto document. But now that we've done that, we can go ahead and render this document. it looks to me like everything's specified okay, so we should be able to get a graph. And there it is. So within our HTML file, we get a nice Prisma document. It has these left-hand boxes on them, and now we're going to see some issues with Prisma diagrams as they apply to PDF and typist documents, and that has, my understanding is, it has everything to do with these left-hand boxes that kind of have different aligned wordings on them. Now you see by default the previous studies and the other studies information is coming in. We can turn that off by consulting the attributes here that we can play with. So interactive, default is false, previous and other. The default values of those are both true, and that's what's creating that left-hand gray and the right-hand gray. So it's going to be easier to read if we just turn those off. So let's go ahead and turn those off. So we'll do previous false, and I'll just do one at a time so you can see what effect that has. That should clear out our left-hand box here. Nice. So it's a little easier to read now, but it's still, font's still small. We can play with font, by the way, too. So maybe let's do that really quick. One of the options we have in this function is font. So font size, the default is 7. I mean, we blow it up to 12 for our old grandpa eyes, grandperson eyes. And there you see it's a little easier to read. But we can also get rid of this other arm. That's nice to have there, but again, those are going to be a little more. I don't know that that's the expectation going into a Prisma flow diagram, is that you're going to have both those other previous and other arms active. You can certainly put them in if you want. But there's a standard Prisma flow diagram. Now we have echoing going on with our code chunks, and we have messages and errors and things like that. But one of the neat things, we can shut those off, but one of the neat things about doing this within code chunks is we should be able to cross-reference this as well. So I can do label, and this will be the figure caption. So look at the pretty Prisma. And then we also want a fig cap. So fig cap, I believe, should be fig, right? Boy, it's been a while since I've done this. Fig Prisma. Now, theoretically, I should be able to reference that at other parts of the paper. So we can put, please see at fig Prisma for a flow diagram. Re-render that. Did see something come through in yellow down there. We'll have to go back and look at that. I didn't like that. Fig Prisma. So let's see, what did I do wrong here? Fig cap. Doesn't have to be. I wonder if this needs to be in double quotes. The labels with spaces in them, they used to have to be really careful about that. More recently, they've been more tolerant. So it doesn't look like that is eat. Let's do a quick look on fig caps, see what I'm misspecifying. Should be able to do it in those chunk options like that. Oh, I mixed them up. I'm sorry. So the label and the fig cap, I reversed those. Again, like I said, I haven't done this for a while. And there's different ways of doing this as well. We'll do this outside of code chunks after we get this to work. There we go. Okay. So now you get that hyperlink, and again, within a Quarto HTML document, one of the nice features of a hyperlink is this preview upon hover, and then you're getting this figure 1 specification with whatever our caption is. Nice. I'm going to turn off those echoes just so it's a little easier to read. And you can do this in the chunk at the chunk level as well. But if you want it to apply to everything, and you can also override this later if you want to decide to override it. But if you want to apply to everything, doing it within the YAML specification is probably the most efficient. So there we go. It's a little cleaner to read. We can blow up that font even more if we want. We can play with colors. We can play with the text that's in here. But what people are probably going to be most interested in are values. And so what I'm recommending to do instead of going into the CSV and changing values within the CSV itself, we can do that within the code chunk as well. And so this is what I think I'm going to do, and then let people kind of take this as they want. So I'm going to subset the data in terms of row and column location. So again, it takes a little while to understand the organization of the information that they actually have. But we have on line 5, we have database results, that is records identified from databases. So this is something that we're probably going to want to alter. So on line 5 is databases, on line 7 is registers. So 5 and 7. And it's data and registers. I'm sorry, databases we should call that. And registers. And what I'm looking for now, so on row 5 are records identified from databases. On row 7 is records identified from registers. The other thing I'm interested in is the location of the number column. So that's column 8. So if I actually build my script with 5, 8, 7, 8, I can just put in the value that I want. And so this is what I'm anticipating creating for next week for people, is a chunk that has all of the relevant fields identified within, identified within the code chunk itself and indicated by these comments. Because again, I don't think that CSV is all that easy to interact with by itself. If you wanted to, you could do that, but this is another option. So if I want to change the records identified from databases and registers, and that's something you would want to control as someone who's creating a systematic review, you can do that right here. You can specify that. So I can say I did 85 databases and 76 registers. Now if I rerun the entire script, that should reflect itself in my flow diagram. And so you can populate the entire flow diagram from within that same chunk specification. Now if you don't have any registers, one of the things I was playing with this weekend was NA. So NA will just get rid of that entire field, which is really slick. So that will change from databases and registers to, it'll just get rid of registers altogether. And that's a really neat function, or that's a really neat capability of this function. And so you can go ahead and change all the other ones as well. I don't need to spend time tonight doing that because I'll do that this week. So what I'm going to do this week is I'm going to fill this out. So on lines 28 through 29, I just have the first two fields in terms of you being able to specify. But I'm going to continue with that so that anyone can put any values in there that they want. So you'll have your own code chunk, and that code chunk will be entirely self-contained for your PRISMA flow diagram for your systematic review. So I think that'll be kind of neat. Now, the other thing that I wanted to take a look at tonight is rendering this within different format types. So this is intended, again, the package authors, they are envisioning, they're thinking about people who might want an interactive component to their PRISMA flow diagram. And here you're already seeing, if I just kind of place my cursor there, you're seeing one interactive component that they have, which is a pop-up. So that pop-up says records identified from databases and registers. And you can see that pop up if we look at the data object. It's one of these fields here. Here it is. So it's the tooltips column. So it's column 6. Column 6 contains your pop-up information if you want pop-up information. You can turn that off. So in the function itself, there is a option to turn interactive on or off. That's funny. So the interactive that they're talking, so by default it's supposed to be false. So pop-up tips, I don't know if we can turn those off. I was assuming pop-up would be part of interactive, but interactive, I think what they're referring to is this 7th column, which is an entire page that contains information relevant for your study. And again, that's what the package authors were interested in providing and creating for PRISMA compliant systematic reviews. But we're not going to do that. Okay, so let's just try running this as a typist document with the expectation it's not going to work. Nothing. So I don't have anything added in my file folder here. PDF should be the same. And I think this has to do with, actually has to do with the flipping of the orientation of the left-hand categories. And they're using HTML widgets to do that. And I think that's kind of interfering with the ability to include that in an HTML, or I'm sorry, in a typist or PDF format. Works fine in HTML. They also have kind of a neat thing here. They also have a different function within this package, and that different function, I may have to look at the documentation again to get that. So the different function that they have that I found that's a workaround to get this kind of thing into your PDF or typist document, it should work for Word as well if you want to do that, is save, PRISMA save. So they have a function in here to actually save that diagram as a different file type. So they support SVG, they support PNG, they support PDF, zip, HTML, WebP. This one is kind of neat as well, but I've had issues with that file type being recognized. So it's not something, I guess, that I've really played a lot much with. But we can use this PRISMA save function, and we should be able to assign it to an object and then call that object up later. So in my code chunk, if I use that PRISMA save function, and I'm going to call up, well, we'll have to call this a plot. So instead of asking directly for my PRISMA flow diagram, I'm going to assign that to an object. Then I'm going to call up that object in my PRISMA save. File name itself, I think we want to specify that. So file name itself, let's call it, we'll try a PNG. So we'll call it prisma.png. And then we'll be looking for that to appear down here and then file type PNG, and then this semicolon we don't need. So let's actually try that. What we're doing as a workaround is we're trying to get an image to be produced, and then we can call up that image like we would any other image within our PDF document. So if I want to, again, we're just going to use that. There's a few different ways to do this. We could do this within a code chunk using a package like Magic. That's the traditional way. We can also just call up any image. So if we look up Yosemite Sam, I don't know why, but there's a nice picture of Yosemite Sam. Copy image address and put it in here. When we render, and this is still an HTML file that's being rendered. I think I changed that back. There you see Yosemite Sam. So just like we're calling up Yosemite Sam, we should be able to theoretically call up this prisma.png. And that's one way to get around, it's one way I thought of to get around the PDFs and the typist document types not being explicitly well suited for this package that we're actually using. Okay, so let's just see if this works first. If it works, then we'll replace Yosemite Sam with the document itself. Oh, it didn't like something. What don't you like? File exists. Oh, maybe I ran it already. So they do have, okay, so I didn't watch it. I must have rendered, I'm sorry, I rendered it without looking. So it is here. If we look at, there it is with our 85 records. If I want to, let's go back and put 76 in there instead. This overwrite might be important, I guess. So if you're creating your document and changing the parameters of the information that's actually going in, you may want to add this overwrite statement. Oh, you know what? I have it open. That was a rookie move there. So it probably didn't like trying to render when I had that image open. Now it's saying it doesn't like that. Oh, I put it in the wrong spot. Too many functions, too many functions. I think, is that right? We may have to go back into the code chunk and go kind of one by one here. Oh, I've got too many. All right, let's see if we can get this. Library, data, Prisma data, so changing it to a list so it can be fed in. Plot, yeah, it doesn't like, so overwrite probably does belong in that lower one. There we get our error. Please set overwrite to true. Well, that's what we tried to do. Let's see if there's maybe a different, maybe there's a slightly different specification. Sometimes the ordering matters, so we'll have to take a look at the ordering as well. So let's see, save directly, overwrite. Did I spell overwrite wrong? No, that looks okay. Huh. I'm not sure why it's not liking overwrite. Let's try a different name to see if it works. Now this isn't how we normally would want to get around that. But again, I wonder if I screwed something up by accidentally rendering without kind of looking and making, like watching myself render there. Yeah, so there it's fine. I'm going to comment this out for now, just so we can get this in. And see if we can call up the image. The image should be in my file space. Prisma 2 is what we called it. And there it's appearing, so it looks like it's probably going to be okay. Now, of course, our cross references are off, so we should be able to move the look at the pretty Prisma within our square brackets, and we should be able to use our fig Prisma in curly brackets. Now I believe we need a pound sign after that. Off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly, so we'll see how this goes before we check the Quarto pages. Yeah, that looks good. Now that does look a little blurrier. So the PNG is coming through a little blurrier. So if we want to play with it a little bit, maybe we will. But the main thing I want to do is I want to see if this renders as a PDF or as a typist document. So we'll try typist first because we like the queue. Watch the queue if this renders. Watch on line 10 here. Watch that queue. That queue is awesome. I love that queue. I love the queue. The typist queue is just awesome. There it is. And we got a cross-reference. That is working fine. We also have, you don't get preview upon hover in PDF rendered documents, but you do get this highlighting that's indicating that it'll take you to the figure itself. Let's try a PDF document. So this is how I would probably recommend using this Prisma flow diagram package in order to create a PDF document either through the traditional PDF route or through typist. Now the other thing, as I said, if you don't like that exclamation point, specification for the, now why does it look less blurry now? That actually looks kind of nice. Oh, it's a little blurry. It's a little blurry. Okay, so let's actually see if we can change that to an SVG. And we're kind of cluttering our folder space a little bit, but that's okay because I'm probably going to nuke it as soon as this is over. And then we'll change this to SVG, assuming that it works. And there's no path there right now because in my file space there is no SVG, but supposedly it creates one, so we'll try it. And again, we're trying this just to see if the image itself is a little more high resolution. There are PDF types you can do, there's HTML types you can do, so we could try all different types if we wanted to. Probably should have done this in typist before PDF because there's the likelihood of something going wrong is just higher going through the PDF process, where there's a secondary file that has to be created called a text file. Those are probably, if we look in the right there, they're probably in our paper_files folder. Oh, there it is, paper.tech. I don't know why I didn't see that. As we wait, what can we do here as we wait? I don't feel like we can celebrate. I guess we can kind of celebrate. We kind of got something. Classic. What a classic. It's still, I'm tempted to abort it. It's because it's taking so long to render. What it's having a hard time doing is accessing that SVG file itself. I'm going to stop it. So let's try a typist file. If the typist file works, the PDF should work. And again, the thing that typist kind of works around or sidesteps is that text file itself. Okay. Oh, it still didn't like. So one thing that we would have to play with a little bit, I think, is that ignore previous equals true. We called it Prisma, not Prisma 2. comes through fine. I'm assuming that the PDF will come through fine as well. You know what? Oh, it is. Okay, great. That's fantastic. So the blurriness is just completely gone. So that's what I would definitely do if I was interested. Wow, that looks great. That is just sharp and clean. We should put a Q. You can change the font as well in those graphs. So if we take a look at some of the other options within the Prisma flow diagram kind of specification, the font itself you can change, and that's just what appears in the boxes. The other stuff is the side boxes. I guess we could take a look at that quickly if we wanted to get rid of that. That's going to get rid of those nice blue boxes that we have on the side. And then I'm going to ask for the plot here. So right now we have these identification and screening and included boxes. If we turn the side boxes off, that should just not include those. I don't know why you would not want to include those. That to me is one of the reasons that we're using the package, is because those just look so great. So I think I would leave those in. And yeah, if I were to do a Prisma flow diagram within a document that I'm authoring within Quarto, regardless of whether I'm doing a PDF or a HTML file, this is definitely the way I would go. So like I said, between this week and next week, what I am going to do is I'm going to complete these lines here, and then I'll make that available to everyone who's interested. So next week on my slides, I'll have code that you can copy and paste into your project and fully specify all of the values within Prisma diagram just by using this code chunk here. And so I'll use this commenting notation specification. So we'll say how many databases you want, how many registers you want. And then normally I would be a little leery about such important information going into a row, comma, indexing specification, but you get visual feedback on it, so that should be okay. So, before you submit this to your advisor, you would want to just make sure that the numbers in your flow diagram look like they're in the right spot. Because theoretically, ultimately, one other thing I want to do, I guess. So I'm saying that you don't need to go and grab that CSV file. The other way to access the data, that CSV file is actually available within the package itself. And so they have a couple of command specifications here to get the exact same file. And so if you just run these commands, you're going to get the same data file that we have. So I'll call it data2. So let's go ahead and run through here. CSV file data2. Now if we look at data2 and data, they're going to be the same information. So data and data2. The only thing different is in data, the one that we took from the Shiny app, we're going to have, in that data object, we're going to have a couple of values in there because we put them in there. So if I go all the way to the right, I see an 85 and a 76. Now if I open up data 2, same value, same information, but if I go all the right, then the default information is all NA. And so when I share my script with you for accessing and using the Prisma flow diagram through chunk specification, I'll probably use this convention of just grabbing the data template, not from Shiny, but just straight from the package itself. It's just a little more efficient. Okay, cool. Thanks everybody for sticking with me on these Prisma flow diagrams. It's kind of fun. It's a fun package to play with, and so I'm glad we're able to kind of twist it a little bit to make it work in all formats that we want: PDF, HTML, and typist. I will verify before next week that the SVG file type comes up okay within a PDF. We're just gonna have to wait for my computer to download the necessary packages that it needs to actually read and report that SVG file. But it works great in typist, so it should be working fine on PDF. All right, thanks everybody. Good night. See you next week will be positron, so that'll be maybe fun for you. I don't know. Hopefully, I'll try to have some fun with it too. All right, have a good week.